The declaration of a national emergency at the southern border has already divided Americans, triggering at least one protest in New York. Tonight in national news, the border wall fight is expected to now shift from Congress to the courts since the president's declaration of the national emergency. CBS's Meg Oliver reports.
The White House is bracing for challenges to President Trump's plan to secure funding for a border wall.
We will have a national emergency, and we will then be sued.
A national emergency gives the president the authority to seize property and redirect funding without approval from Congress.
We should not set the terrible precedent of letting a president declare a national emergency simply as a way of getting around the congressional appropriation process.
Democrats in the House and Senate are vowing to fight what they've called an unlawful power grab. They're planning to introduce a resolution disapproving of Mr. Trump's move.
He's going to protect his national emergency declaration, guaranteed.
Senior advisor Stephen Miller says the president would likely veto such a resolution.
If the president can't defend this country, then he cannot fulfill his constitutional oath of office.
California's attorney general says his state will challenge the emergency declaration in court. The ACLU and other groups are planning lawsuits. Some Republicans are also raising doubts.
In the great state of Texas, we care about a little thing called private property, and there's going to be over 1,000 ranchers and farmers potentially impacted if the government comes in and takes their land.
Hurd said the federal government isn't designed to operate by national emergency. Meg Oliver, CBS News, New York.
A former University of Montana constitutional law professor says the president may not have authority under the National Emergency Powers Act, but might under the U.S. Constitution. According to Rob Nadelson, a former professor and now a senior fellow at the Independence Institute in Denver, a president needs to reference another law. He says a president needs to cite specific statute that states under these conditions that the president may call for an emergency. The U.S. Constitution gives the president authority to defend an invasion, according to Nadelson, but he says the president may have a better argument under the Constitution.
The government of the United States does have the responsibility to repel that invasion, but it's unclear whether the courts would permit the president to do it alone without the support of Congress. One way to make sure that this national emergency passes muster under the National Emergencies Act would be to issue a supplemental declaration saying, I am citing this particular law, but he's got to find a specific statute that authorizes it.
Now, in his proclamation on Friday, the president cited the Ready Reserve statute in the U.S. Code and parts of the National Emergencies Act, but Nadelson says no specific emergency statutes. Last week, the U.S. Senate passed Public's Land Package 928. This bill includes a land and water conservation fund, which helps fund fishing access sites, trails, and playgrounds around the nation. And MTN's Medeiros Babb talked with local conservation groups who are hoping the funding for this program gets reinstated soon.
It spans industries. It brings people into Montana to recreate. It also brings jobs. So it's a critical program for Montana's economy.
Marnie Smith is talking about the Land and Wildlife Conservation Fund, a fund that invests money from oil and gas revenue to develop public lands. Back in September, Congress did not extend the funding, so even though it is authorized, the LWCF cannot be used.
It would be like trying to run a car with no gas. So to have the program reauthorized without any funding accomplishes one significant piece but leaves another one still on the table.
That's where the Public Lands Package comes in. The bill has gained support from both Montana state senators, but due to the government shutdown, the process of getting that bill through Congress was halted. However, now it has officially passed the Senate and is on its way to the House before ending up at the president's desk for a final signature. Winter Wildlands Alliance employee Hillary Eisen says each day the funding isn't extended, the American people lose out on about $2.5 million in money that could be going towards parks, trails, and habitat conservations.
It was a big disappointment, and it's been frustrating, I think, for Montanans all across the state that it's taken Congress so long to act. But we are again very grateful for what the Senate has done and very hopeful that the House will quickly follow suit.
Both Eisen and Smith say this program is extremely crucial, not only for access, but for the state's economy. Smith says over the life of the LWCF, the fund has provided around $587 billion to the Treasure State. In Bozeman, Medeiros Babb, MTN News.
And joining me now at the desk is Rob Griggs. And Rob, last night was cold, and now it could be just getting colder?
Yeah, it's going to be colder tonight. It's going to be even colder again tomorrow night before things turn around a little bit. So we're just buckling for President's Day. Let me show you what's happening on the map right now. Satellite radar composite shows temperatures already falling well below zero up to the north of us, and right around zero at many other locations. Gosh, Missoula is still above the zero mark there at 13 degrees. Now, our 24-hour temperature change map shows just what's happened in the last 24 hours. Right now, it's a full 18 degrees colder at Cutbank in Great Falls than it was this time last night. 15 degrees colder in Butte, 16 degrees colder in Missoula. Even Billings were about 6 degrees colder than we were this time. And the wind chill's already starting to show up. Look at that, 36 below wind chill at Cutbank, 35 below at Great Falls. We're going to see wind chills all night long in parts of central and northern Montana, including out here in eastern Montana, in the 20 to 30 degree below range. So we'll have that with the President's Day Monday and work week forecast in just a little bit. Zoe?
Thanks, Rob. And during these cold winter weather, there are many ways to keep your house warm, but those ways are also the leading cause of house fires. And according to the Billings Fire Department, after a fire last week, the department wants to remind you of some cold weather safety tips. The department says space heaters are a leading cause of home heating fire deaths. Deputy Fire Marshal Tyrone Morgan advised keeping space heaters 3 feet away from things that can catch on fire, such as upholstered furniture, clothing, mattresses, or bedding. He says it's important to make sure heating systems are working properly to avoid carbon monoxide poisoning. Morgan also told us that you need to watch out for your pipes freezing during this time of year. More information from Deputy Fire Marshal Morgan is on our website. Senator Daines was in Montana last week and stopped for a visit at the Rimrock Foundation in Billings. The senator talked with people at the Willoway home to learn about their program. And what Willoway does, it allows mothers to go through detox and rehab while staying with their children. Daines learning just how important some of these programs are for those going through treatment.
What would happen if you didn't have this? What if you think about where this has been going with these women, their children? Without this, where does this end oftentimes for these families?
Jail, foster care, broken families.
The senator says the Willow Way is just the type of program he fought to include in the Child Protection and Family Support Act, which he co-sponsored 2 years ago. Well, thanks for watching us here on Q2. After the break, it's still winter. Find out how farmers and ranchers deal with the challenges they are faced with now that calf season is underway. And later in sports, a year after going viral, the Arlie Warrior movement continues to grow. We'll see where the message is headed coming up.
You're watching MTN News with Zoe Zandora, Storm Tracker weather with Rob Griggs, and sports with Casey Conlon. This is the 10 o'clock news on Q2, Montana's news leader.